looks like we have a good amount of people in, so I say let's get started. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the fourth virtual panel for PRSSA Reimagined. I'm so excited that all of you guys could join us tonight. My name is Kaylee Busher, and I'm the Vice President of the University of Memphis chapter of the University of Memphis PRSSA chapter. So just a little bit about PRSSA Reimagined. It's a national programming partnership with Grand Valley State University, Kennesaw State University, Samford University, West Texas A&M University, and American University. What was I going to say? Okay, so because of COVID, you know, the school year is looking a lot different this year, and so many chapters are looking for additional programming events, and so we all came together and. Good God, a mess. Okay, so anyways, so thank you all so much for attending. I just want to say that there will be there will be 2 more events for PRSSA Reimagined, so be on the lookout for that. Tonight we'll be talking about corporate social responsibility with Sean Greenwood from Ben & Jerry's. And I just want to say a quick little things before we get started. Everyone just please make sure that your mic is muted. Just double check and make sure to stay towards the end because we're having a Q&A session. We wanted to make this interactive, so Sean put together a Slido, which is a polling and live Q&A platform. So Sean, if you want to go ahead and put in the code event in the chat so that we can, so all the students can access that through their phones. Don't worry, it's you don't have to download an app. It's just like, you know, you just go on Safari and just type in Slido, and then we're all going to put in a code for this event. And Sean's going to have some like quizzes and like polling questions for us to answer. So then lastly, just as a reminder, there will be an optional student networking. So be sure to stick around for that. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. Sean, if you want to go ahead and just quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. While you're talking, Kaylee, I'm admitting people. It's like you made me co-host, so I'm in there. I'm putting notes in. I'm running the show while you were talking. So I'm just like your right-hand man for this.
Let's see. Okay, so it looks like so the code is 65696.
Yeah.
So if everyone just wants to go on Safari and just type in Slido, and the first thing that should just pop up would just be like enter this code event.
And I've got it here on the screen. I can share it too.
65696.
All right, how's that look? That coming through for everybody?
Yeah, looks good.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. A very, very nice opportunity to be able to connect with PR people that I love, right? It's been my the majority of my career at Ben & Jerry's. I started, and you're going to see a couple quick photos here of, I started as a young guy. I was pretty close to your age in 1988 when I started working for Ben & Jerry's, and now it's 32 years after I started, and I still am lucky to be able to have you know, a business that I love working for, that is one that I think continues to be innovative and impactful. So I think we'll run through some prepared slides here, and then I think we have time for some good Q&A with you folks.
Sounds great.
Excellent. All right, to start off with here, your event is reimagining in terms of kind of what is PRSSA, what is public relations, what does that mean for a career? And it made me think a little bit about when you're reimagining. This was a flavor we did with Ben & Jerry's about 15 years ago, called Imagine World Peace that we did. That's not 15 years ago. It's 2012. 8 years ago, we did this flavor. It was in New York City. You see Maggie Gyllenhaal over there with our co-founder, Jerry. We launched this with the John Lennon estate. And then we reenacted the Imagine event, which was the bed-in that John Lennon, one of the Beatles, with Yoko Ono, actually held as kind of their honeymoon. So we reenacted, if you will, the bed-in for peace that you see there on the side. And so it made me think, kind of, what are we trying to imagine as a business? What are we trying to do? And how do we live up to these values, right? We continue to evolve how Ben and Jerry's has been this social activist company. And so that photo that you see there is from a Bloomberg story this past summer that was talking about all of these things that Ben and Jerry's gets involved with. So they did a real in-depth interview that I helped manage that as the PR director, and be able to brag up kind of what is that Ben and Jerry's believes in, what we try to do. We certainly are not perfect. We have a lot of room for encouraging our fans to get involved with these issues, and we're going to talk about how that model looks. To start off with, I talk a little bit about Rep. John Lewis, who most of you probably know passed away recently. John Lewis was just a towering figure in the civil rights movement. And so this was his quote. He shared this when he was growing up. When he was a young boy, he would go to the local town with his mom and see the signs that, because there was segregation existing at that time, he'd see the signs that say white people here and colored people here. And he said, "I don't understand, Mama, what's going on?" And she said, "John, don't get into trouble. Just, mind your business and don't get into trouble." And he said he soon realized that he'd have to get into a little trouble, but it was good trouble, necessary trouble. And I think that's what Ben and Jerry's has tried to do with its business over the years, is to find a way to be able to use the power of business, which for us is, the most powerful kind of force in our communities and our globe that exists today. That's where the money goes, and that's a lot of times where the politicians follow. And so Ben and Jerry's tries to use the power of its business to be able to get involved with these issues. So here's actually a art exhibit we just put together that centers around John Lewis's graphic novel, the trilogy March. And so this is a picture from that we just actually posted this at our factory visitor center here in Vermont, and we have a virtual one online that you can see. And one of the big messages that John Lewis supported was around voting, right? He traveled around the country to try to support, especially people of color, to feel empowered to vote. And so it's one that we went back to that same recipe and kind of utilize this story to be able to remind people of the importance to vote with the upcoming election. So I'm just sharing with you today kind of, what it is that Ben and Jerry's does, how we do these things, and try to use the power of our business. And so what we see, the reception of it, right? This is an article from Fast Company this year in July that talked about Ben and Jerry's response to the murder of George Floyd. And part of that, we'll take a look at that. I also posted that on my Twitter account. If you have not seen it, my Twitter account's at PRPooba, that you can see that statement in its entirety. And we're going to touch base on that pretty soon. So I find words are important, right? This is in terms of, does it matter who says the words, right? So if you read this quote that says, "It is incontrovertible that race relations have improved significantly during my lifetime and yours, and that opportunities have opened up and that attitudes have changed." That is a fact. Now, if this was someone speaking around racial justice, if I said to you this was our president, what would you say, right? If you hear those words, what do you think when you add that to our president? If I tell you that it's our president, Barack Obama, how does that change your belief? I think it does a lot. I think when I thought of this quote, and I thought, if this came from President Trump versus President Obama, I would have a very different opinion on that information. I think similarly for Ben and Jerry's, getting involved with a lot of these issues and taking a stance on issues in general, that we have earned, at least in some eyes, the ability to get involved with those issues. There's probably no reason why an ice cream company would talk about racism. But because that is in our DNA, I think we have kind of that understanding from our fans and from the public at large. And I think as long as those actions match your values, right? That's the big challenge for, I think, all businesses. You always want the ability of when you take a stance on the issue, you want it to be able to be something that people will say, wow, this is really what they stand for. So in terms of knowing Ben and Jerry's, I can ask all of you, for those who have a pint with you, or what's your experience with Ben and Jerry's? Most people know us as an ice cream business. I would challenge that we feel we are an aspiring social justice business that happens to make ice cream. And so, these are kind of those things that make up the business. So here's the picture of me when I was a young man starting out back in 1988. I was a junior at the local University of Vermont, and have worked for Ben and Jerry's the last 15 years, specifically in public relations. So in terms of doing PR, right, I have to do all of the communications planning, the strategy for our programs and launching everything. We need to also understand what it is in terms of opportunities. Well, how do you respond when the press reaches out? So interviews with the Food Network I'll do, and when there's journalists that contact me. I do a bunch of writing on chunks and swirls. Sometimes it's challenging when you're kind of performing that corporate job in public relations, and sometimes it's a lot of fun. The next picture here is some of the fun stuff I get to do. The pictures on the bottom are a couple of the partnership flavors that we have. So hanging out with Stephen Colbert for his American Dream flavor, and Jimmy Fallon with his Tonight Dough flavor. We're going to talk a little bit about those. But one of the other things, I have a photo in there on the top left is with my family, where we were marching on the streets in Washington, D.C. for the climate march a few years ago. And it's one of the things that Ben & Jerry's believes strongly in. If you have a strong belief in an issue, you need to be willing to take to the streets. And that's what we try to do with our business. That's what we try to do with our fans, is bring them along on that journey. So we get involved in all kinds of issues, right? It could be pop culture issues, things like fun flavor names. It could be the newest trend in ice cream, which is non-dairy frozen dessert. So you see there's one of our flavors. We do these partnerships like with Nike, where we launched earlier this year the Chunky Dunky sneaker. We get involved with issues like politics, where many businesses are concerned about getting involved with heavy issues and being involved in controversy. Ben & Jerry's is not a stranger to that. It's something we've been doing for a while, and trying to tackle issues like racism that you see in the bottom right-hand corner. Right, so we use our company voice and the power to be able to talk about. So if we're investing money into these hydrocarbon freezers that put out less pollution into the environment, we may decorate, like you see this freezer, and put this in the store so everyone can see it and they understand what that's about. And that's what we believe is the power of our business. It was founded on these two real guys, right? There was really a Jerry, there was really a Ben. Both of them are still employees of the company. They've worked themselves to a position where they just get to work on the projects they like at this point, and most of that's around our social mission. But when the two guys started the ice cream company and were in business for the first year, they came up with these philosophies. Business has a responsibility to give back to the community, and if it's not fun, why do it? So those are the two basic principles of the company from 1979 until about 9 years later in 1988, when our board of directors met with the entire company. We closed down the business. I remember it was my first year with Ben & Jerry's. We all went to a hotel, this large hotel conference room, and we reviewed this mission statement that they proposed. So this is taking those first two concepts and kind of really putting a lot more meat on the bones. The idea is that all three of these parts are equally weighted. So it's product, social, and economic, that where some businesses previously might have said, if we make some money, we'll give some away. Ben & Jerry's says, we believe there should be equal investment in all three parts for this, that everybody who works at Ben & Jerry's is judged on that. So you may be the finance person, but you still have to answer at the end of the year, how did I contribute to the social mission? So it's one that we practice. We have this kind of listed all around the workplace, and it's something that we use in decision making all the time. Right, so our product mission is making great products, whether it's the new flavors we have, the Netflix and chilled there, which has both ice cream and non-dairy, and those sunflower butter non-dairy flavors down on the bottom right. These are our almond milk non-dairy flavors, right? So we've got about 13 total non-dairy flavors right now. It's the fastest trend in the ice cream category. But the big issue, I think, that separates Ben & Jerry's from a lot of other great ice creams is our social mission, the fact that we're interested in justice. right? And so both this Lady Liberty knockoff with our cow mascot, I actually thought was very similar to. Recently, there was an annual art exhibit that happens here in our hometown in Burlington, Vermont. And so we sponsored this piece that what you see described there as a multi-layered depiction of a queer Black warrior leading the revolution for justice and change. That's what Ben & Jerry's does, right? We want to use our sponsorship money to go out there and take a stance on an issue and highlight where we think there's the opportunity for equity. So we take to the streets when we believe in issues, right? Whether that's that climate march, pride parade. The bottom left corner is actually the Greyston Bakery, where we source brownies. The brownies are made by homeless people. They are given job skills and training and given a place to live with a kind of a 100-day apprenticeship program. And so it's this opportunity to be able to bring these people in with an open hiring policy where they're not judged on their previous background. For anybody aware of kind of the label that comes with spending time in prison, when you get out, when you're applying for a job, if you have to check the box that says I've spent time in prison, I'm a convicted felon, that can very much greatly affect your chance to get employment. And so we're happy that we can purchase that brownie that does all of this social good. So if you eat our chocolate fudge brownie ice cream or a half-baked ice cream, both of those contain brownies in there. So you can find Greyston Bakery online. They're very unique organization. We could purchase a cheaper brownie, but for us, our if you go back to our mission, we want to have an impact, and we'd rather buy this brownie that makes a bigger impact in our community where we can be supportive. Issues like supporting, when social movements happen, right? When things happen in society, this is different than if you're a business and you plan out the year and you say, okay, we're going to launch these products at this time and have this campaign. You still need to be able to react to what's going on in the community around you. So about 10 years ago in Vermont, same-sex marriage was legalized. It was an issue Ben & Jerry's had campaigned on for a long time. We were one of the first businesses to offer partners, domestic partners, same-sex partners, benefits. About 30 years ago, we began to do that as one of the first US companies to do so. And so when same-sex marriage was legalized in Vermont, we renamed this iconic flavor Chubby Hubby and called it Hubby Hubby. We took this out to the local town clerk's offices in the two biggest cities in Vermont to scoop out the ice cream and say, we want to support the fact that our belief is people should marry who they're in love with. And this interview that I did with the advocate that you see the pull out there in the blue quote was saying, is this just a marketing decision to sell more ice cream by pandering to gay people? And my answer was, it's not a marketing decision. It has nothing to do with marketing. We're not making any more money off of selling it this way. It allows us to practice our values. It may hurt our profits, it may help our profits, but we're doing it because it's what we believe in. We believe in using the power of that business to be able to talk about these important issues and about systemic change. So here you see a slide saying Ben & Jerry's is not partisan, it is political. So we don't take sides on an elected official. So you won't hear us say, vote Trump out, vote Biden in, or vice versa. But we do get involved with issues. And so, the lower left-hand corner picture there, we took a stance both on the Dakota pipeline as well as the Keystone pipeline, saying we don't want to be drilling across these lands and to be investing in infrastructure like fossil fuels. We wanted to invest in renewable energies. And so people will say, well, that's, of course you did that and you went after President Trump. We actually started with the Keystone pipeline, and that was when President Barack Obama was in office, and he had not taken a stance on it. So we went out publicly and said, Mr. President, we'd ask you to review this, and we think it's important to be able to support that. So it's not about being partisan. It's about taking a stance on an issue that usually is, again, more systemic. So they are entirely political, but not saying we want you to vote for one person. The bottom right-hand corner you see there was our refugee campaign we've been running in the UK now for about 3 or 4 years. It's a huge issue there, as much as we've been focusing on racism in the US. So when President Trump was elected, we actually put out a letter that said publicly, that said, we want to work together, but if you do something that's against the values we believe in, then we'll do whatever we can to try to highlight that. So when President Trump first took office, the proposed Muslim ban that was presented, or some people say it wasn't a Muslim ban, either way, we felt it was necessary for us to put out this response saying it's time to stand up and stand together, because we feel our country is much better when we have diversity and look at people from all countries, from all walks of life, and are able to have that as the fabric that represents the United States of America. From there, we actually take these stances, and people will say, okay, we get it. So you do these things because people will then like you, and then they'll want to buy your ice cream. That's not what we do. What you see in this model is the difference of, that's kind of more cause related marketing, right? So across the top of this screen, the blue shapes will say cause related marketing is finding an angle to be able to, some issue that will emotionally connect with the consumer and convince them to buy your product. That's not what Ben & Jerry's does. We look at what's the issue we want to take and make a change on. So it may be supporting same-sex marriage. It may be highlighting systemic racism. It may be supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. And then we look at how do we activate on that using all the power of our business and bring our fans and the community along on that journey. So we learn more about it. We're able to share that with folks. And what that does is creates kind of more authenticity around this issue. So it's not right. Whereas cause related marketing can just be saying, let's say we're going to give some money to a disease and have you, so you'll think we're doing something good. And it's not that there's necessarily anything bad around that. What we feel like is there's not the same values as incorporating it more deeply throughout your business. And that's how we really feel we are this aspiring, business that just happens to make ice cream. So we don't try to just stay too serious all the time. We try to have some fun. It's definitely a component of our corporate identity. And so after taking a stance on that same-sex marriage issue, we ended up putting out this poster for this new ice cream sundae in a cup called Flipped Out. And we said, we married fudge, ice cream, and brownies. Don't worry, it's legal in Vermont. It's a little bit just kind of poking fun at ourselves, knowing that people see us as very progressive, and what we want to do is be able to use that fun, have a good time with folks. And certainly one of the most fun things we do every year is Free Cone Day, ever since our first anniversary in 1979, where we open up the scoop shop doors across the globe and give away free ice cream all day. Now, we don't do these things alone, right? We're experts in one thing that you can probably guess. So that is making ice cream. In terms of these issues, right, when we get involved with things, so the folks who are listed here have been coaching us through our racial justice work over the last 5 years. So whether it's NAACP up there, ACLU, Color of Change, Demos, the Advancement Project on the far right, those organizations are the experts that are on the streets. They're the ones that are getting work done around racial justice. And so we use them to be able to be content providers for us, to help teach us, educate us, and to bring us along on that journey, and how we can then reach out and do the same with our fans and the community at large. The list that you see underneath are 4 areas that are happening, right? You can't just do that work externally. You have to also do that work internally. So these are 4 areas that we're working on within Ben & Jerry's to make sure that we're including people of color and supporting with our business. So it's one that people of color will want to help support. So this is how we started kind of getting involved with racial justice. It was a trip in 2015. We put up this posting in 2016 to share with people that we had gone to North Carolina to learn from these NGOs and ask about civil rights and what it is that we can do as a company. They said, with 2016 being an election year, please go out and get people of color excited to vote. And so we started learning more about it, using these folks to help teach us. And this was one of the highest engaging posts that we've ever done from Ben & Jerry's, which is about racism, right? We know we can measure it by determining how many people have visited the site, how long do they spend on that page. And so we know it was something that was very popular with people. As we went out to the streets, then we developed a campaign that was called Democracy is in Your Hands, where we scooped this brand new flavor we invented just for the campaign called Empower Mint, that we went out, parked on the street, tried to get people registered to vote. And if they were already registered, remind them of the importance to vote. So you see our slogan there, we believe it only works best when it works for everyone. And so in that process, as we were out doing this campaign, there was the murder of another Black man by law enforcement. And so Ben & Jerry's officially stepped in and said, we will support the Black Lives Matter movement. This was in 2016, as you see in the fall, just about this time of year. And so it was an issue that we had not talked about at the beginning of the year. It was not one that we said, let's start that democracy is in your hands campaign and then elevate to the Black Lives Matter. It was responding to the situation. And that's, I think, one of the ways that Ben and Jerry's has continued to earn some authenticity, to say when we get involved with these issues, they're living, breathing issues, and we want to be able to react to them. And as this movement grows, it was something that we felt it was important to be part of. Again, we're doing that work internally as well as externally. So this was an event that Ben and Jerry's put on that was called "Silence is Not an Option." It was a takeoff on the statement that we put out externally. So this was an event we held just for Ben and Jerry's employees, and we invited these speakers that you see there: Ibram Kendi, who's the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, Congressman Sheila Jackson, who's supporting the HR 40 bill around reparations, Vanita Gupta from the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice, and Attorney Ben Crump and Philanois Floyd in the bottom right. Phil is the brother of George Floyd, and so to be able to talk with those people, the statements say his name when you hear that around people or say their names of folks of color who have been killed by the hand of law enforcement folks. There's a reason for that. It brings back the fact that they were human. It keeps that their sacrifice is not something that happens hopefully without some impact. And so that was an opportunity for us to be able to connect, to hear from Phil talking about his brother and saying, his telling stories of his brother walking in the kitchen and grabbing his mom's hand, and while Marvin Gaye was playing on the radio, he would be dancing with his mom in the kitchen while she was trying to cook. And we want to humanize those people. We want to understand it's not just about a statistic, and it's not something that we should ever feel comfortable with. We then, after that Democracy is in Your Hands campaign, and then the additional campaign on Black Lives Matter, of signing on to that, we started really digging in and doing a lot more work over the last 4 years. So that's included the Vote Yes on 4 referendum that was in Florida that restores folks who are returning citizens who have served their time in prison, and offers them then the chance to get back involved with the political process to be able to vote. So we did that. On the right, you'll see this is actually a tweet we just put out this week. We had been working with folks and supporters in St. Louis to close this prison called the Workhouse, which is a notorious, a prison with many folks who should not be in there because they're just poor and can't pay their way out of prison. But also it was just not a fair area and space and living condition. It was very, very poorly handled and managed. And so we went on a campaign, took to the streets last year around this, and you see the vote happened. The local government said, okay, we will close it. And right now they're actually saying maybe we shouldn't close it. So we're calling that, again, trying to call out that issue of justice to the community at large and apply some pressure that way. We get involved with those issues you see in the bottom left-hand corner, right? So we talk about, what does the penal system in criminal justice do to people of color? What did redlining do when people were returning from war and buying houses and not, if you were a person of color, you couldn't live in a certain community, all right? The Jim Crow laws and the history of slavery. We just launched a podcast with the ACLU and Jeffrey Robinson. That's a great podcast to learn about the history of slavery. And then the bottom right-hand corner, we have that justice remix flavor that we've been doing that supports criminal justice reform. Right, so then we put out this statement after the murder of George Floyd that used very stark language. It didn't say the untimely death of a black man. It said this is a murder of George Floyd. Right, we added these specific actions that we say, here's actions for our president. Here's actions to work on with the HR 40 Commission. Here's actions that the family of George Floyd is asking for the formation of this task force. And so we put that out in very stark language. And I think because we have been involved with these issues so much the last 4 or 5 years, again, people are willing to listen to that because they feel like we are actually doing the work. And so the statement concluded with that quote at the bottom saying, unless and until white America is willing to collectively acknowledge its privilege, we're just going to continue to add names to that list. Since that statement, right, it's not a check the box and now you're done. Now you sit back and say this work's over. We've also got involved with the defund the police movement and talked about how do you invest and divest, pulling money out of the police budgets and putting in things there like education, healthcare, and more. And then there was the opportunity with Instagram and Facebook to be able to talk about the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, which Ben and Jerry's joined, to be able to say, we want to support both our partners like ACLU and Color of Change that are leaders in that movement. And so it's an important one for us to sign on. We even used our platform to be able to launch a flavor to talk about, since we didn't like the way that the national politics were going, we don't think that the administration represents our values. We said we're not partisan, so let's go out and call out those folks who are doing good work in those issues. So we actually highlighted groups that were supporting the environment, groups that were supporting women and development, supporting people of color. And so we worked with this artist, Fabiana Rodriguez, who's an activist herself, and she helped to design this pint to look very different from the usual Ben and Jerry's pint, and to be able to call attention that we are trying to support people of color with our work. So we do these partnerships not only with with the folks who advise us through these issues. We also have a lot of flavor partnerships. So you see the far right there is Elton John, who came to visit Vermont. We did a flavor called Goodbye Yellow Brickle Road. We have Jimmy Fallon on the far left with his Tonight Dough flavor, and then Stephen Colbert in the middle with American Dream. So you can find stories about that on my Twitter account and a couple of videos that explain, right, the fact that when we work with these celebrities, we ask them to donate their proceeds to a worthy cause. And so Jimmy Fallon was really passionate about giving his money to the Serious Fun Children's Network. So you can learn more about that online. And Stephen Colbert donates his proceeds. He actually has his staff that helps choose organizations around the US, and they split up the money at the end of the year, and each of those organizations gets a check every year. So it's an issue that's very powerful for his staff to get involved with, and Stephen calls it his most favorite night of the year when they get to do that. So that's it. I'm going to take a break now, and I'll hand it back to Kaylee so we can start to go through some questions.
Yeah, did you want to do the Slido account?
I did.
Slido platform?
Let me see if I had. I will get over here and try to make
I
sure
didn't know if you were going to do it at the same time, or if you just like wanted to do that after. Great presentation, by the way.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure why my screen is froze right now. I can't seem to minimize that.
I would say, well, if that's okay, we can just
Oh, I see it. I see it over here.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks pretty considerable right now. So how important is it to you that the businesses take a stance on social issues? So somewhat important, 20%, extremely important, 81%. I heard a statistic today from an online group that was saying 93% of folks feel like it's really important for them, especially as they're considering their career, to say, where are we going to work? Let's do it with a business that really embodies some sort of social issue. So I'll see if I can escape out of here and see if I can get the next poll going too. All right, next one's up. So I think if you put in that code, right, you should be able to go back.
I was just gonna say, you guys, if you guys haven't, if you didn't hear, we're doing a Slido, which if you enter the code 65696, you can join the polling and Q&A session. You don't need an account for this either.
All right, so this one's just kind of looking at Ben and Jerry's knowledge of kind of, usually the most popular thing I hear after speaking is people go, I didn't know you do all that. We thought you made ice cream and that was it. So it's interesting kind of hear. Sometimes there are some super fans that weigh in a little heavier than that.
The code is, yeah, okay, yeah, nice. Alrighty, so I guess we'll just go ahead into questions.
Yeah, and we've got one more. We can do one more Slido before the end.
Yeah. Okay. I guess yeah. Just pull up that Slido. And yeah. Looks like we have some questions in the Slido as well.
Click down there. Do you just want to read off what you see for questions, Kaylee?
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, so what was your favorite activism or social awareness campaign to work on?
That's a really good question. There's been a lot of them, right? I mean, it was just funny when I saw, your phrase that you folks use around reimagining. I don't usually have that slide in this deck. And I was like, oh man, that was a really fun activation. I like that we tried to do that and kind of bring back that idea of peace and using that the flavor proceeds from that flavor went to the organization Peace One Day, that was trying to negotiate in some other countries outside of the U.S. like ceasefires to be able to go in and help provide immunizations for children. So, there's just so many over the years. I think, most recently in 2015, 2016, that Democracy is in Your Hand campaign. I remember because of my role, I often get to be the MC at events and kind of introduce people, and standing behind the stage and listening to the speakers who were up there. Our co-founders Jerry and Ben were there, as well as the reps from ACLU and NAACP that were talking about their history in North Carolina, saying there used to be a time where there was a very important boycott at the time of civil rights activists and young people of color sitting at the counter at a Woolworths demanding to be served, and said we're not leaving until we're served. And so one of the speakers said we used to not be able to get served ice cream at the counter, and today ice cream has come to us. It was a really nice moment to be able to feel part of that and to feel like we obviously have not had an impact on systemic racism, right? When you walk around the country, it's still very much in place. So it's not like we take credit and say, oh great, we accomplished what we were looking to do. But to be able to take a stand and highlight a lot of that, that's a really important thing, and that feels really good.
Great. So I have to personally ask, so why do you call yourself the Grand Poobah? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So part of the idea at Ben and Jerry's is you got to have fun, right? We talk about if it's not fun, why do it? And people, this like there's a serious part to that, in that people expect if they're going to come connect with you at Ben and Jerry's, there better be some fun to it, right? And so even if we put on a press conference and people come in and they'll go like, hey, if this is just a boring old press conference, they're like, where's the spirit? Where's the Ben and Jerry's? And so I think over doing that for years and years, we've certainly developed this idea, especially for PR, right? When reporters come in going, hey, I'm here to get a scoop of a chunky monkey, I'm hoping, while I'm here to tell this story. So there's certainly that aspect that people expect us to have fun. And one of those is our business titles, right? That we could have a plain business title like anybody else. And the little fact of having something that's creative and interesting that you hand over in your business card or send to somebody, and they look at you and they go, are you kidding me? Grand Poobah up here, that's so great. That's so much fun. You guys at Ben and Jerry's, you know how to do this in a fun way. And it's a little thing, right? Any business could say, yes, we want you to create a fun title and be able to do that. And it's something that it just supports that notion and continues to have it, so it perpetuates what people really find as value in terms of the fun side of Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely unique.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see what some more questions we have. Okay, so when we're interviewing to work somewhere, what questions should we ask to make sure the company really cares about their community and employees?
Yeah, that's really a great question. I mean, the idea of what it is that you want to do with your careers, right? Often when I speak with PRSSA groups and they're saying, okay, what advice do you have? And I'm like, if you find a place that you can work at, as I have been fortunate to be doing this for over 30 years now, at a place that you believe in, that feels like it's trying to do the right thing, how lucky can you have a career in doing something like that? So I think, I challenge people to say, we all have to get jobs. And so when you go out, I say, be picky, make sure you're interviewing the company while they're interviewing you, and say, I have a lot to bring. I have a lot of passion, try to get whatever experience you can in that job. And then go in and say, I want to know, how does this company truly activate on its values, right? Other companies should not be Ben and Jerry's. That's not authentic, right? When we talk about being authentic, it doesn't help if you go, I want to be like them. No, be like you, and just figure out, like, our belief is that every business should be able to have a positive impact on their community. And so it could be local, it could be global, as long as you can find an organization that does something like that and professes that same belief and acts on those beliefs, that's really the thing to do.
Right. So I guess that leads into the question, does Ben and Jerry's offer student internships? Are you guys doing any like remote or in person?
We do. We have one, or at least in the public relations department, we have one intern per year that comes in. And so right now we're working on that intern, and we'll start probably, interviewing again in the spring to look to bring in another intern. So we do that in the PR department. We've got probably 3, 4 interns that are, kind of exist throughout the organization. The headquarters is not that big. There's about 100, 110 people that work there total. So we do have a few, though. They're very challenging to get hold of, but it's, real nice opportunity for those folks who can.
Yeah, we'll definitely all have to keep an eye out for that opportunity when that comes out. Okay, so let's see. Oh, it looks like you have a poll. Oh,
Just threw out another, the kind of what feeling folks have in terms of the most important thing that they heard.
What would you say was in this?
I like the comments. Currently planning my trip to Vermont, Vermont has also been doing a really good job managing COVID so far. Part of it's because we're so little, and part of it's because we're not very populated. There's like less than 500,000 people in the whole state. So we've been a really good place so far. So if everyone wants to come up, we'd be happy to put you up.
Okay, I'm gonna ask, I'm looking through these questions, there's so many awesome questions. Okay, so do you have any advice for someone who wants to speak up about social justice, just not in professional settings, but personal as well, but feels intimidated?
Yeah, I think when that slide that I put up saying when your actions match your values, right? Like that's such an important thing. And for people to say, a lot of times there'll be criticism around businesses saying, if a business goes to take a stance on an issue and they haven't been working on it, right? So and I think you hear that today around the Black Lives Matter movement, if a business posts something like, we stand with our Black and brown brothers and sisters at this difficult time, what is coming back to them from all of us is, well, what are you doing? Well, how do you stand with them and how do you support them? And so there's always that opportunity. And part of it is, again, we don't want other businesses to be Ben and Jerry's, right? We want other businesses to do what's important to them, but to be able to take a stance and get involved somehow and make a positive impact. I think understandable, not all businesses can do that, right? You either may not be able to because of the structure. If you don't have leadership in place that's committed to it, makes it really difficult. But for folks to be at least get involved in issues on their own, right? There's such a great opportunity to be able to volunteer locally, to be able to lend your voice, to be able to get online and talk about these issues. There's really I don't think it's probably been easier ever, right? I think 10 years ago, you didn't have the ability of going, I'm just going to get on Twitter and be able to talk about these issues that are important and be able to support those. And obviously, I mean, everyone's heard it the last 6 months and the last 6 weeks, vote, right? Being able to get out there and be active for everybody who's of voting age to be able to participate that way. You can then vote on issues. And part of it, when I was a young person in college age, I didn't understand the value of local politics, right? I would say, okay, I'll vote for the president, but I'm not worried about the local justice of the peace or the local town sheriff. And what I've learned and really helped understand much more, part because of our partnership with the ACLU, is a lot of those local voting opportunities are still great chances to be able to talk about your values. So if you say, for Ben and Jerry's supporting saying, we believe that, people should not be judged by their past. If you have a criminal record, people should be able to get a different chance. If you have a local sheriff's race and one sheriff goes, I believe everyone that commits a crime should be thrown in jail and the key locked away no matter what, then that is matching your values. So you as an individual can look through those opportunities locally when you're voting to be able to support your values as well.
Right. Okay. So do you receive a lot of backlash for your stance on certain topics? If so, how do you handle that?
We receive a ton of backlash, right? That's the issue when you take a stance on something controversial, right? So I was telling you the story about us supporting same-sex marriage, right? When we renamed Chubby Hubby to Hubby Hubby, we put out a press release. Big buzz. It was like 300 million impressions. This was, a dozen years ago. So it's such a huge story. And then I think overnight, because my name was on the press release, I had 3,000 emails that were mostly people who did not like that position. they felt very threatened by it for whatever reason. So right, we try to be more prepared around it. We try to have a thick skin and to understand what we take as a stance and the direction we feel the country should go. People may not agree with that, and we need to be respectful of that. Right, when people say, I don't believe that should happen, we believe in the power of people supporting businesses when with their purchases. Another statistic I'd heard today was 69% of Gen Z folks support the businesses with their dollars, right? And so that's fine for us. If you don't agree with the support of same-sex marriage, or you don't agree with support of the Black Lives Matter movement, that you don't need to buy Ben and Jerry's. But we think we want to do it because it matches our values and what we want to do. The fact, like, if people will support us because of that, that's great, but that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because we believe in that. And then what we find is people go, wow, you guys really are authentic. You're taking a stance on these issues. You're getting involved with stuff that may not be popular, but you're drawing kind of that line in the sands. And here's where we believe it's important to speak our voice.
Right. Have you guys ever made any social injustice mistakes? Like, if so, how did you fix it?
We are certainly not perfect, right? So there's definitely been issues throughout our years. A couple of the big mistakes I can think of. One was, right, I was talking about values-led sourcing, where, like, using the brownies from the Grayston Bakery, we had actually worked with an apple bakery that was doing apple pies. We had them produce apple pie, kind of pieces of apple pie that we had put into an apple pie flavor. And after about a year, the apple pie flavor just wasn't selling well. So we ended up kind of canceling the contract, but the vendor had, invested in all this new equipment, purchased a new building, hired new workers, and all of a sudden a year later we didn't have the way to support them. And so they had to close all this down, and it was a real traumatic issue for them. And so we were like, all right, we got to be better about this to make sure when we're working with these vendors to say, we want to support you, but you need to be able to stand on what it is that your business is without Ben and Jerry's. So you can't just say, I'm going to triple the size of my business to work with Ben and Jerry's, right? So that's one that we learned that was, a little painful, and one that didn't have negative intentions, but it certainly didn't have a positive impact. And then I think of another one when I was working at our Waterbury plant here in Vermont, when I was younger doing tours. I remember when ice cream would fall off the production line, it'd fall on the floor, like, an ice cream soft at that point. So like the pint lid comes off, there's ice cream oozing on the floor. We would take a hose and spray down the floor and wash all this ice cream down the drain. What that ended up doing was kind of polluting the local water system, because ice cream in there is a very high BOD count. And so it's kind of like flushing 10,000 toilets, right? What we're spraying down the drain. So we learned about that after we had made this mistake. And so, all of a sudden there's a headline out that says, Ben and Jerry's, this company that says it believes in environmental protection, is poisoning the local water system. And you go, right, that's not consistent, your values and your actions. And we're like, look, we didn't understand the impact of doing that. We thought we were just keeping the floor clean. We'll do, so we ended up installing vacuum cleaners that we would then suck up the ice cream and put it into a giant barrel. And then we took the barrels and went and fed pigs at a local pig farm. So it worked much better that way. And what we heard from people was, they were saying, we didn't think you guys were trying to do something wrong. We believe you are a company with values, but you got to do better.
Right. So someone was saying, would you be open to ideas for ice cream flavors? This would be fun to do as a poll.
That would have been a great poll suggestion. Listen to this list of flavors that are suggestions by fans: chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream, chunky monkey, chubby hubby, cherry Garcia. Like, those four are four of the top 10 flavors of Ben and Jerry's. All of those suggested by fans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
and that's your favorite, the cherry Garcia.
My favorite, cherry Garcia. So there's definitely, we listen to our fans, they know ice cream, and it's worked out a lot of times. And when you look at our bestsellers, we owe a lot to our fans.
Love that. All right. So, so what actions internally do you and your team take to cultivate an inclusive environment that reflects the visions of these campaigns?
Right, there's campaigns across, like we said, like the environment, like we want to be environmentally responsible, so we try to operate our business that way. So whether it's looking at, we went and did an analysis of our operations from cow to cone. So when cows are given milk, what's the impact there? What's the impact on the environment? When we're making ice cream, when we're shipping ice cream, when we store it in freezers and freezers run, all of that has an impact, right? It all leaves a footprint. And so we tried to be responsible around that. We put a self-assessed carbon tax on our business about 5 years ago and started saying we're going to pay $10 per metric ton of carbon that we put into the environment, and then use that money to do things like carbon digesters on farms, here in Vermont where we get our dairy. So it's this great opportunity to be able to walk the talk that way. The racial justice work that we've been really dialing up over the last 5 years, internally, I talked about those, right? There was 4 different groups there. We've got one working on how do we continue to support people of color to come into our franchisee program and buy a Ben & Jerry's scoop shop and operate that. How do we grow our suppliers like the Grayston Bakery that's, in Yonkers, New York, that's mostly a Black community there. How do we look to involve those folks and have that be more impactful in our business? And then, what's our culture like for, obviously, we're all at home right now, which makes it a little more challenging, but we're still doing the work on how do we continue to dial up our culture, right? We exist in a state in Vermont where we're 94% white. Right? That's not a lot of diversity. And so how do we make our, at least Ben & Jerry's community, one that people of color say, hey, I love what you stand for. I want to work for a business like this. And to be comfortable that way is a huge issue as well. So I think we're trying that learning, right? In terms of racial justice, I'm helping co-lead with another coworker of mine, a book club. So we've been reading books on racial justice, right? So we've read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me. Right now we're doing the new Jim Crow laws by Michelle Alexander. And so we get together and say, let's talk about this and what can we learn as a business in a state that's mostly white, right? But what we hear is racism is not a Black person's problem. Racism is a problem for our country. It's everybody should have skin in the game on that, regardless of what your skin color is. And so we know that we can be helpful that way. And what we've seen in kind of doing this work externally is important. So we need to keep doing that work internally too.
Right. Okay. So what advice would you give for recent grads to initiate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at their workplace?
You have to have support from your leadership. It's really hard to do anything in your workplace from the ground level up. You'll hear these stories of like Amazon workers going on strike. It's a really hard way to do that. It's much better to talk to your leadership and say, I think what you see right now, the Black Lives Matter movement has certainly helped to bring awareness around equity, right? And I think the equity has spilled over, that it's not just around people of color. I think it's around women. I think it's equity around differently abled people, right? I think indigenous people. There's certainly much more of an awareness right now, and interesting, right? Even in this little state that I live in, and with such a heavy white population, when I drive around community to community and see so many signs on people's lawns saying Black Lives Matter, that didn't happen 5 years ago. It didn't happen 20 years ago. And so it feels like there's at least a growing awareness around that. And I think that is certainly something that you can impress upon when you're working for a business or considering working with a business, to say, what is your commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion here? And what do you do? Because if they say, well, we are scared about it because it's a real controversial issue and we don't want to take a stance, to say, I think there's a way that you can learn and you can be able to open that up, right? And for us, I think we put ourselves in that same bucket to say, we're not experts in it. We definitely learn more, and we're able to do these advocacy campaigns more and to learn more from that, right? I definitely have a much better working knowledge now around racism. 5 years ago, I didn't know about all of this, right? When I was growing up and I was your age, there was never a class that said, let's talk to you about the Tulsa massacre, right? That was history that had been sanitized through this white lens that was just not talked about, where today those issues are talked about. So I think if you can bring that up to your leadership and be able to get them to understand the value of it and why it is so important, with so many folks coming into the workforce, if all of the best people who are Gen Zers that are going out into the workforce go, I'm only working for companies that are really doing something good that way, the folks who aren't are really going to have to take a look at it.
Right. All right, so we'll just ask 2 more questions. Okay, so how do you feel like Ben & Jerry's has impacted their competitors in corporate social responsibility?
I think we hear from a lot of folks going, what you did was impactful. Sometimes I think it's a real positive thing because it supports other businesses saying, we want to do that too. But I think sometimes it's a negative thing because people go, we're not Ben and Jerry's. We can't get involved with those things. And I try to always bring that up when I'm speaking to groups to say, you shouldn't try to be Ben and Jerry's. That's not you being authentic, right? We shouldn't try to be. Patagonia is an incredible company, but for us to say, let's just do everything Patagonia does, that's not authentic for us. And so I think that's part of the challenge with that is for businesses, we don't want it to be, it's not secret, right? It's not magic sauce when in terms of getting involved and making a difference in your community. And it's not that you don't make mistakes, but I think when you share your intentions are you want to try to help support progressive values and equity. And people go, oh, you made a mistake. When we were dumping ice cream down the drain and poison the local environment, people are like, no, we know you want to do something good. Now correct your error and do something better. So I think there's that part of it that while I think it can definitely be an inspiration, and right, Ben and Jerry's was acquired by Unilever, right, a big CPG company 20 years ago, and at the time people were going, well, it's gonna damage everything that Ben and Jerry's was. It's never going to be like that. But here we are 20 years later, and we're still working on these campaigns and still having Irreverent Fun, and I think hopefully what I see is Unilever over the last 20 years, right? When they bought Ben and Jerry's, they said, this is a great acquisition to our portfolio. We're going to make a lot of profit off of this ice cream company. About 4 years ago, they acquired another small Vermont business called Seventh Generation that does, like responsible natural cleaning products. And when they bought Seventh Generation, they said, this is going to be a great asset to our portfolio of values-led businesses, right? So they changed their tone within 15, 20 years for this really big company to really start talking more about saying, what is their purpose? And so I don't think that's Ben and Jerry's like the tail wagging the dog. I think that's a big business like Unilever saying, we see the value of this and this is a smart thing to do. And you hear it now from the Unilever, the chairman will say things like, if all we're doing is counting money at the end of the day, we've missed our calling as a business. So hopefully all of the business, not just Ben and Jerry's, but all the businesses that have been involved with this work of trying to be socially responsible and take action have inspired other businesses to get involved in some small way. It doesn't have to be to the same level, but to be able to do something, find a way that you can contribute to your community.
Right. Last question. Do you have any advice on someone who's looking to get more involved in social justice advocacy on a broader scale?
Yeah, I'd say, pick an area that you're interested in, try to deep dive in it. Try to become, as immersed in it as you can, right? Because I think what you see is when a business says, all right, now we're looking to bring in an employee and we believe, strongly in diversity and inclusion. And if you say, look, for the last 3 years, I've been working, with a local organization. I've been learning more about it myself. I've been getting involved with campaigns. I've been seeing how, this training happens at different workplaces and is impactful. To be able to bring that to an organization, right? So then if you're applying for a job and you go, yeah, I've just got my degree, maybe an undergrad degree or a master's degree, but I also have 5 years of working on this issue in this manner, that's a tremendous thing for an employer to be able to say, wow, what initiative that is. And to be able to be aware of those progressive issues, I think really demonstrates a lot of character. And I think that's super helpful for organizations, that it's something we certainly look for, right? When people come in, we want them to know what Ben and Jerry's is about and that they can speak intelligently about that. But we also like to hear when they say, I believe strongly in clean water. And so I worked on an activist campaign around water rights in my local town. And you go, those are the kind of people that are have so much fire around being an activist. Those are the people we want.
Love that. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for all being here, and a huge thank you to Sean. Thank you for volunteering your time to share your insights and experiences with us. I loved the presentation and all your answers to the question, and thanks again.
Thanks to you. Well, thanks for having me. Really nice.
So now, thank you. So now we're going to transition to the student networking. So for anyone who's unable to participate, please feel free to hop off the call now. And thank you again for being here. All right, so Terry, if you want to go ahead and break everyone up into little breakout rooms to chat about what you learned tonight, how your school year is going, and whatever else you want to talk about. And then afterwards, we'll come quickly back together.
All right, so I'll just go ahead and give everybody a couple seconds to remove themselves. What do y'all usually do for this? About how many people per room?
Samantha?
I feel like it kind of depends on how many people stay, but maybe like,
You want to do 5 rooms of 5-ish?
yeah, I think that'd be good. Just so
Okay.
there's not anyone like in a room by themselves or
There we
something.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead, and it looks like these are going to just be assigned automatically. So the rooms are open for y'all.